Sweet, thanks, Lisa. Yeah, hey everybody for the last session for today. I hope you all watched the whole TFF so far and learned a bunch of things. And this is the last session on the topic Tableau and analytics adoption. So we do another panel. Just some housekeeping before we get started. Please use the Q&A to ask questions. I'll try to include them in the conversation. And if you want to ask a specific person, please include the name in your question. So if you did attend the Tableau conference last month in Vegas, you might have seen the focus on culture and adoption. It was pretty much the main theme. It was very prominently featured in the first keynote. And if you walk through the data village, you will have seen the Tableau blueprint booths everywhere. And I think the whole mini golf thing was related to that as well. So there's really the acknowledgement that adoption and getting people to actually use Tableau and analytics in general becomes more and more important. And that it's not just having a tool and that solves all your problems. You also need to get your people to actually know how to use those tools. So for the purpose of today, we talk about adoption. And for me, it's sort of the process of getting people to utilize data and utilize analytical processes to support their decision making. And obviously, it's sort of, because we are here at the Tableau Fringe Festival, it's focused on Tableau, but there are a lot of sort of surrounding technologies and things that people need to keep in mind. So that might be ETL tools like Tableau Prep or Alteryx or others, or it might be SQL as a querying language to actually do something with the data. We have 4 participants for the panel today. I'll just briefly introduce them by name and where they work, and then we sort of start the conversation. So first off, we have Kate Shaw. She's a technical lead and DB admin for the State of Montana Department of Administration. We have Zach Bowders and David Kelly there. You can see who is who with the little letters above their heads. And they are both senior data analysts at the LSAC St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. And then we have Brian Smith, who is a senior advisor for data analytics at Cardinal Health. So with that, I've sort of one larger introductory question to each of you. So maybe because Brian is on the top left on my screen, we start with Brian. Could you just tell us a bit more about who you are? So what do you actually do as part of your role? And how does that relate to the analytics adoption in your company?
Well, for the purpose of this discussion, primarily my role is the Tableau community manager at Cardinal. And that means that I run the user group, I handle training as much as possible, I do individual coaching and development whenever I can. I also am a general subject matter expert within our various data environments.
Sweet, thank you. Then let's go to Kate.
So as Alex said, I am the business intelligence lead for the state of Montana. And I wish I had sort of a generalized idea of what I do, but it sort of depends on the day. Generally, I oversee the use of data analytics within my department. But that sort of is more overseeing dashboard design, whether that's for our custom applications, for public consumption or executive dashboards. So in terms of adoption, it's sort of my goal and role to make sure we have developers that know how to use Tableau and the tools that they have available for data visualization.
Cool, thank you. And lastly, Zach and David.
Do we have to choose me first? Okay, hold on. I'll speak for myself, but we're both analysts, so we're dealing with data directly. We're doing dashboards, we're doing analysis and reconciliations, projections, all the tools, and along the way, hopefully inspiring people and getting them excited.
I do all that too.
So maybe I do start just addressing you as one person, and then one of you answers. So if we just stay there, what would you think the state of adoption is in your organization? Where are you on your journey, and how long has it been since sort of there was that acknowledgement that we need to do something about it? David and then Zach, maybe.
It's definitely a maturing area with us. I think before Zach and I kind of came into where we are now, things were a little stifled from a creativity and even the amount of analysts there were at the organization. So we're very much a budding and growing area.
Yeah, I mean, we're by no means the tip of the spear in this. It's a whole community effort. Basically, we are trying to, from a grassroots level, get people excited and sort of get that to spread throughout the organization. And sometimes that means you're hosting Tableau doctor sessions or trying to spur an internal Makeover Monday. Sometimes it just means you're checking in with other analysts and basically users a lot to see, hey, what are they responding to? Are they not responding to? But just trying to keep in touch of what's going on and seeing, being very iterative in your approaches.
Cool. What about you, Kate?
So we're sort of similar, where I would like us to be a lot further along than we are, but we're sort of in a spot where we've been using Tableau for about 4 years now. And I'd like to think that we started to have a community, and we've sort of regressed, which is unfortunate. In our area, we have a lot of people who were sort of forced into their roles in using Tableau, and it's not the norm, and people don't like change as much as we wished they would. So we're sort of at a point where we're trying to figure out where to go from here in our adoption in our community within our organization. Because we have so many silos that it's like this group uses it, this group uses it, and I'm sort of trying to rein everyone in. And we have not had like generalized adoption from the top down. For us being state government, we sort of need that buy-in from our CIOs and our CTOs. That's sort of starting to take out now, which is helpful. So looking to sort of figure out the best ways to, now that we have that buy-in from our CTO, how to get everyone else on board and figure that out. We're sort of in the process. Check back in a few weeks.
After the break. And Brian, what about you?
I think I kind of need to give two short answers. At an organizational level, like many other companies, we've identified data as central to our strategy, and that's influencing a lot of how we organize the company as a whole. I'm in the business intelligence and analytics team that's been brought under a broader umbrella recently called augmented intelligence, which is going to link us up with our machine learning, automation, things like that. So we're trying to become much more aggressive and forward thinking in terms of that. As far as Tableau is concerned, Cardinal is a very broad company made up of segments that were, many of them brought on by acquisition. And so we have a kind of a disparate organization. And Tableau, in the 8 or so years that we've used it, has really been very grassroots. It's really come from the user level up. And so that has been a challenge for us in many ways, but it also means that the people who use it really are committed to it. And so my role as the community organizer for as long as I've been doing it has been to bring people together, make sure they have the resources that they need, make sure that they can learn to do what they need to do with the tool, and realize the value from the investment that they made in the tool.
Cool, thanks. So to sort of summarize that, it sounds like sort of Kate is very much at the beginning of the journey, while David and Zach are sort of maybe halfway. It sounded like there's a lot going on for you guys anyway, and you can see that David fully embraced his role with his attire. And for Brian, it's a bit of a mixed bag with sort of a strong user base, I guess, but maybe not really the network and the community as such yet.
Well, we are certainly working on it. We have a user group that actually we met literally yesterday. We get together about 8 times a year. I'm sure we'll get more into this later in the presentation, but we've done a lot of work to structure people's entry into it and development along their curve.
Cool. So I wanted to pick up something that Kate said, where she mentioned that sort of there was some sort of progress done, and then it sort of, I don't know if it was neglected a bit but basically the adoption went back and it wasn't as strong anymore, which sort of hints at that it seems to be really a topic that needs a lot of attention and constant attention. You can't just say, okay, yes, now we adopted things and we just let it go. I was wondering, David and Kelly, David and Zach, do you have similar experiences with that?
Yeah, it's very much, it's not a seed that you can just kind of toss on the ground and expect to grow. You definitely have to take care of nurturing it and feeding it occasionally along the way. We constantly, as a growing organization, have new analysts that come in or leave or move amongst the areas where they've stepped into a SME role. So there's a constant churn and a very much an ebb and flow to when people get involved with the rest of the community and when they don't.
I would agree with that. Also, it's we sometimes try initiatives and they bomb, and sometimes we try initiatives and they're great. The first time we held a Tableau doctor session, we were super enthusiastic. We invited everyone we knew. And to quote David, the time we had the most people in the room was when
they came in from another meeting to take chairs.
We sat there for 2 hours and it was an empty house. But we've had other times when it's been highly successful, where we've tried other initiatives and they've gotten a lot more engagement. So rather than sort of stick with, hey, we tried this, it didn't work, we're giving up, we try different iterations of things and we see what's getting traction and what's not. And just because it bombs once doesn't mean it's going to bomb every time. Or maybe there's a specific reason it didn't work.
Yep. Brian, what about you? Was that a steady growth or sort of setbacks?
In terms of adoption, it's been a very steady growth. In fact, our customer success manager from Tableau loves to show us the line going up. So I think we've done very well there. Again, the challenge that we've been focusing on is making sure that the people who have it know how to use it. And we've structured a lot of our engagement around that. For example, every week I check to see who has recently gained a Tableau desktop license, and I have a Word document that I call a welcome kit that I send to them, which is, hey, here's a link to get here, here's a link to get here, here's our Yammer page, here's our SharePoint page, to make sure that we both give them what they need to get started, but also convey to them, we have a process, and welcome to the beginning of it. We're going to guide you through it to make sure that you have what you need. I'm going to take this moment to mention that I'm really happy that Fiona Gordon apparently is watching, because we've adopted her Tableau Quest training framework, a team-based gamified training framework that I learned about from her last year at Tableau conference. We've been doing it for close to a year. We have 13 teams, about 150 participants, and so that's been going very well too. Hi, Fee.
Well, that sounds like a great sort of, well, actually a great sort of adoption story, where you actually have a huge group of people already joining and sort of being there.
And I could talk about that all day, but what has really been terrific for us for that isn't just the fact that we have that many people in the process, but the various teams have their own leaders who are doing very well with the tool, and just using that has given us a community of champions, of people who are leading the teams. And so we've been able to do recorded training sessions, and I'll talk to Fiona about that later, recorded training sessions put on by those champions. So we have literally different voices doing the training session by session.
So that might actually be an interesting aspect to look at, that it's not that you probably can't drive adoption just yourself, or maybe a small team of people, that you really need to get the buy-in throughout the whole company.
Yeah, trust me, I've tried it both ways. I'm having a lot more fun now.
Kate, how does that work for you? Do you sort of have a team of people to rely on? Do you try to train up people to sort of step up?
I think you just asked the $1 million question. So in state government, we're sort of unique in that, like, I may be a lead, but I don't really oversee a lot of our users. And they also have jobs that they do, like a lot of these people are developers by trade. So Tableau has only sort of been when they need it. So our licenses sort of get shuffled around. So we constantly have new people using it. And even then it's only for, you know, one specific application. So it's been tough to keep up with the moving of who's actually using Tableau. But a lot of it is, it's sort of been like a one and done where, okay, I have this application that I just created and I created all the dashboards that I needed and now I'm never going to touch Tableau again. So we try to train up these users and we get them to a point where they're sufficient enough in what they need, and then they sort of drop off the face of the earth. And so we're constantly having to sort of start back at square one. And that's sort of, like, I know you and I met at the conference to figure out better initiatives and how to get these people to actually buy into Tableau more than just when they need it. So that's sort of what we're working towards. And we've been having discussions since the conference of, okay, what can we do to actually get people excited about it instead of just, you know, the one-offs. I am technically a lead of a team per se, but they're sort of in the same boat of they use it when we have something to work on. And we're sort of trying to find that right balance of maybe we don't have a project that's needed right this second, but what else could you be doing in Tableau to advance your skills or find something cool that we may want to put out just on our public data portal that's not necessarily for, you know, a very specific project.
Cool. David and Zach, do you have anything to add to that, or maybe a tip how you can engage your user base a bit more, especially if they are sort of seeing Tableau just as a tool for one project and then they move on?
Zach actually coined the phrase to the approach that we're doing of making data less scary. Mm-hmm. It's kind of a across the spectrum thing. We have a lot of executives that, you know, still rely on archaic formulated reports out of Excel, and they still have to kind of put together the story themselves. And then, you know, at our end, it's being able to train people at all levels, not just data literacy, but improving other analyst skills in Tableau, or just being there as a resource if they have questions or just want to talk or do a peer review.
Yeah, I mean, so some of the things I've tried is we've done a making data less scary email where I either highlight reporting and dashboards that we've done and sort of walk through use cases, sometimes even through GIFs or animations to show this is how you can successfully navigate your way through this and understand. Other cases are sometimes there might be a user who is sort of widely known as sort of number shy, like they're not super into data and they're kind of intimidated. And I had one of these users who, after I helped create a dashboard for her that was highly interactive, walked through several steps of it and came to a business conclusion and put it into practice. And I asked, can I use your story and tell it in one of these emails? So we worked together and I sort of walked through exactly what she did and told the story in the email. And that sort of got some really positive feedback from the user community where they were like, oh, I didn't realize it could be this simple and intuitive. And I can use these things as tools to come up with my own stuff. But I mean, one of the obstacles you have is Tableau is an excellent tool. I mean, and even if people become tool competent, it doesn't necessarily mean they're sort of storytelling competent. It's much like I use the example of being really excellent at driving a car. You know how to brake, you know how to turn correctly, you're mechanically down solid. Like there are Tableau users that do advanced chart types, but they might throw 17 colors on a page, or you know, use a donut chart when some simple bars might get the job done. Sometimes, you know, they're using the tool correctly, but they're not necessarily getting the momentum out of it that they could if they had more sound storytelling technique. So it's a blend of the two. You have to be tool competent and storytelling competent.
Cool, thank you. I have to admit a bit of the panel here is for my own benefit because I try similar things in my organization at the moment. So that's really interesting to see what sort of other aspects people do and what other methods there are. And I think that email is like it's a nice way to just highlight simple things and sort of try to get that out to people. What other things did you do? I mean, we heard from Brian. He's running a user group and doing the Tableau Quest sort of upskilling levels. Zach and David, you said, well, you obviously to do Tableau Doctors. I think I'll come back to that a couple of times with your t-shirt. You said Makeover Mondays. What sort of what's the initiatives that you think drives a lot of that and actually work really well versus the ones that are just sort of complementary but maybe not as impactful? I don't know if we start maybe with Brian.
Well, let's see. There's one that was put together by a colleague of mine. So this is something that I will take no credit for at all. It's a regular dashboard review committee where he brings together a bunch of people who are kind of ahead of the curve user-wise. I'm honored to be part of this, but again, I do not organize it. And we review dashboards that people have put together. We critique them, give them some guidance about how they could make them better. Obviously, that's a narrow pipe. That's just, you know, the one person who spoke up and said, hey, I want to do this. But we really have seen good before and after benefits. It's just a question of, to somebody's earlier point, it's hard sometimes to persuade people to kind of put their baby in front of you. And, you know, they can be very shy about that. And it's, you kind of have to just go ahead and make the joke that you're being a complete hectoring scold about this as you tell them, well, here's why this is bad and here's why this is bad. There's a lot of diplomacy involved in that. But the results can be really, really good.
David and Zach?
I mean, my approach, as you've called out several times, is the data doctor. I'm really trying to keep it very light and friendly. I have a pack of dum-dums in my coat pocket. I have a self-made prescription pad for the data doctor. I just keep it really light as much as possible, just to make sure that people aren't overwhelmed by if I'm giving them a critique. They don't have to. It's just my perspective. It's not necessarily they don't have to implement what I'm offering as advice, because that's all it is in the end. It's just our way of communicating to them. Hey, here's another way of looking at it, or here's something that you might think of doing differently.
To your point about to your point about the prescription pad, a big component of the dashboard review is we have somebody taking very careful notes during the whole thing, so we can hand them, hey, here's our list of recommendations that might, you know, make this have the effect that you want a little bit more. So they have a takeaway to work from later, because who's going to remember 10 tips all at once?
Do you do that review publicly? Like, do you stream it or do you record it, or is that just you do it sort of in a meeting room and then send out the notes?
Kind of in the middle. The only people who are required to be there are the person whose dashboard is being reviewed and the people reviewing it. But we do invite other people to sit in if the person supplying the dashboard is okay with it. So we will typically have 5 or 6 people who are on the call in order to, and we do it over Skype, who are on the call just to kind of glean what wisdom they can from it.
Cool. Yeah, David, Zach, do you want to say something?
I mean, one thing that's worked well for me is oftentimes if you have a public setting, some people are shy and some people are more uncomfortable showing their work, especially if they feel they're showing it to sort of more experienced people, because they don't want to be seen as, sort of newer or less experienced. So one thing I do is I just go around and visit people. And oftentimes I bring my laptop and show something I'm working on, because I sort of put myself out there and show a little vulnerability and say, hey, this is what I'm doing. I'm working on this right now. What do you think? What are your thoughts? Oftentimes people, almost without you asking, open up and are much more free about showing you something they're working on. Like, hey, I'm working on this. And then I'll be, genuinely curious about what they're working on and ask questions. And sometimes they're like, did you ever think about trying this? Or something like that. Not along the lines of, I'm not really loving the blue on blue color scheme, but it's just something, being curious. It's like when you're curious, people sort of respond and they want to answer your questions because they're excited about what they're working on too.
Cool.
We still, at least I still maintain what I call my wall of shame, which is the very early stages that I made of Tableau. I liked color a lot. lots of color, because it was new and exciting, and it was terrible. But I keep it as a reminder of, here's all the iterations that I've made on my path. So I can show those to the newer analysts as well. Those either early in their stages or those that haven't been able to progress because they haven't had as much time. Just to show them, growth will happen. You just have to, keep at it.
I was just going to add on to a little bit about what Zach was saying about being vulnerable and showing your own work as well. I know some of what's worked for some of our group members we've done some internal makeover Mondays, and it's sporadic so that it's not like you have to do it every single week. But in our meetings, we hold sort of just a group review session to go over what's been posted, whether it's a current one, whether it's an old one. But they always get to go through mine first. Before we ever go through anyone else's, it's always mine first. And just for the fact that they can see what someone else is doing. I don't care what they say about mine. I go through review sessions with my bosses all the time, so I'm used to that. I participate in Makeover Mondays, so I'm used to that feedback, but it gives them a chance to not only review someone else's work, but see that we all go through the iteration process, that it's not just a one and done thing. So even though someone may be so far advanced ahead of other people, it's not like we put out a dashboard that's completely finalized on day one. I mean, even in simple Makeover Mondays, I see people do, 2, 3, 4 iterations. So it just gives them that idea that, we all have to go through this, no matter if you're beginning or a lot more advanced.
We have a question. Oh, yeah, we have a question from Fee actually. What's so with all the adoption efforts that you did so far, what's the biggest learning that you would advise people that they should look at, should take care of, and that they should consider when they start driving adoption in their organization? Zach?
Be comfortable with stuff not working. I mean, there is no one path to success. There's going to be lots of stuff you're going to try. There's going to be stuff that you're really excited about and sort of personally invested in that people aren't going to embrace. I tried to Makeover Monday once. I basically picked a small group. I asked them if they were interested. They all said yes. We picked an internal data set that sort of hadn't really been cultivated. It was like a fresh opportunity for everybody. And I even gave them like a good period of time. And at the end of that period, I came back and I was the only one that had done it. And it was, it was a bummer. I mean, we got to explore the data no one else had done before, but it didn't go anywhere. And rather than, sort of feel any negative feelings towards it, I'm like, okay, you know what? We tried that experiment. On to the next one. Killing your darlings sometimes is what writers call it. You may have an idea that you think was awesome, and it wasn't that awesome, or at least it wasn't that great for that particular context. So you have to come to your users where they are. Case in point, some people have maybe felt a little intimidated by us both doing data doctor sessions together. We're two of the senior Tableau users in the company. So if you're walking into a room and it's just the two of us sitting there, it can maybe feel like a little bit of an inquisition to some people that are more introverted and less comfortable with that situation. So we're looking at doing essentially open house doctor hours, where just book one of us. We'll go to a room or come by our desk, or we'll come by yours, and we'll work with you individually rather than it feeling like a 2-on-1 or whatever.
And we're growing the data doctor community to engage more people, because it's not a either an up or down trajectory. The more people there are, it's not an exponential difficulty path. There are going to be as many people in favor of supporting you as there are not supporting you and handicapping you in some ways. So there's going to be challenges and there's going to be successes. We just hope in the end that it's more successes than failures.
Brian, maybe next.
A couple of things. I mentioned earlier about the quest leaders becoming sort of a community of champions. And so I think my biggest learning is identify the people with the enthusiasm who want to do more. Find those people and give them stuff to do. And even though they may not know they want more stuff to do, you need to persuade them that they want more stuff to do. I make a point, we have user group meetings about 8 times a year is probably how it works out, 8 or 9. And I make a point of making sure it's not the Brian show as much as possible. If I do a user group where I'm the only one talking, then I have failed. And that is whether we're doing something that's more on an instructional bent. So for instance, in January, we're going to do one on all the different kinds of actions, particularly because set actions are fairly new and parameter actions are very new. I'm going to be doing a good bit of the talking, but one of the members of my own Tableau Quest team is going to be doing set actions because that's something that he has really taken to. And he's actually going to do a short brown bag on it, Skype-based, next week. But I'm asking him to take that whole presentation and do that for the larger user group. So find your champions. But going back to what David and Zach were saying about meeting people where they are, we found in the Tableau Quest program, there's an online learning component. People just couldn't get past that hurdle. Budgets go up, budgets go down. Time is always precious. And telling somebody, hey, you got to spend 17 hours doing this, they're not going to do that unless their boss is telling them to, and that's not going to happen. So that was very difficult, and that's how we got into the position of what I mentioned earlier, having the champions record shorter training sessions and actually have people, attending them online as well. That's been much more successful. We've had people able to get through that. It's a little bit shorter, but it's also more personal, and it's coming from experts within the company that you can follow up with and ask questions to. So I think that was another big learning, is that you need to course correct if what you're doing isn't working and find a way to get them the benefit that they're otherwise missing out on.
Thanks.
Kate?
So for us, I think the biggest hurdle that we've overcome is getting people to a state where they are starting to adopt Tableau. And to do that, they've had to have some sort of sense of ownership in what they're doing. So it's really easy to throw out, why don't you work on this, or why don't you work on that? But I think all of us being part of the Tableau public community can see this, is that when you're really vested in something, it shows in your work and your desire to do better and put forth the effort to improve upon things, whether it's from feedback or some user testing. If they don't have any sense of ownership, or they don't have any sort of incentive to do better, a lot of people in the workplace, at least in my workplace, throw out the bare minimum and it'll be like a show me chart and call it a day. But once they have that sense of ownership, you see their work just improve leaps and bounds. And part of that we've done has been sort of a train the trainer work session. So they'll see something cool and it's like, okay, why don't you learn how to do that and bring it back to the group and train us? So it may be something that I'm familiar with, but they aren't. So they may have seen it in my work, and it gives them that sense of ownership to learn something new and then come back and present it to the group, especially if they've found it to be interesting to begin with. If it's something they're never going to use, they're never going to have that vested interest and want to learn more about it.
Here's an analog like.
And then the flip side of that, did you make a huge mistake where you sort of in hindsight say, yeah, that was just stupid and nobody should do something like that? Anything that any of you can share with us?
This gets a little bit esoteric, but we do an annual Tableau Day conference, so like a mini conference one day a year in September. And typically we will include a segment toward the beginning for people who have never seen the tool before. And so I think it was 3 years ago, we had the bright idea to actually have a longer segment like that and have it the afternoon before for the brand new users. And then have the main one the next day. What we ended up doing was murdering our participation. because the people who were there for the newbie stuff went home and didn't come back the next day, and the people who weren't interested in it didn't do that, etc. And it just pummeled our numbers. So, well, not doing that anymore. And I think we've recovered from that pretty well. So we've had 2 very successful ones since then. So yeah, don't do that.
It's a very good advice. Yeah. Second, David.
Most of the things I've talked about are bombs. So I mean,
of course they are.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the Wright brothers. How many planes are you gonna like nosedive into a prairie before something takes off? I mean, that's the learning. It's I figure very few people get this right the first time. That's why blueprints such an emphasis from the conference this past year. So it's really for me, the things that haven't been as successful is when I try to treat things as just a huge group. It's when you expect to speak to a mass audience. And I mean, we're not coming from this from a position of authority either. We're not community leaders within our organization. We're trying to sort of just spur excitement and get people involved. So we're totally grassroots here. We're asking forgiveness on a lot of these, or going and saying, hey, would anyone be interested in participating in this? For me, almost every success has been at a smaller individual level, and few successes have been at a large group level. So I've had someone I've sort of casually mentored for about 1.5 years, and I've seen exponential growth out of that person. They weren't an analyst. They came in from a different position and really started growing and developing. And when I got busier at work and took my foot off the gas there, I saw that slowed down a little bit. So when you're able to work more directly with people in that capacity where you're in regular contact and you're sort of showing them your work, they're showing you their work, you both grow together. But I haven't been able to do that at scale. I'm not doing that at a mass level. So yeah, failure. I don't work well in groups.
I let time get away from me. Very often I'll go without having regular scheduled meetings with anybody. And so they kind of fall off of my radar, and therefore they fall off of other people's radar. So maintaining a work quota and open availability is a very difficult process, hopefully not just for me, but for everybody else. And just making sure that time is available.
One more thing. We are known internally as the Tabros. I don't think we really started that nickname, but it's stuck. And that's been hugely detrimental because no one likes bros, and it actually made like a sort of internal, like, oh, hey, it's the Tabros. So it's like after that, when you're trying to interact with other people in your own internal community, they sort of see you as like a unit. You have a nickname, it's an odd intimidation factor, which is just wholly unfounded. And I do have that Tableau shirt though. That's great.
You mad, bro?
Yeah.
But you're definitely recognized, and you sort of have a brand established internally then.
Yeah, I mean, it's a thing. It's not intentional. I mean, we don't call ourselves that.
Sometimes.
We don't intentionally call ourselves that.
We try and have a little bit of levity to wit, and I think that's actually surprised a lot of people that analytical people can be a lot of fun. So just throwing that out there.
Yeah, before we were sitting with the rest of our division. We're embedded in a business unit. We're not in IT, and we're not a vertically integrated structure for analysis. So we work within a business team. And we were sort of off to the side, and then we moved to a new building, and all of a sudden they're all sitting around us, and they're like, we thought you guys were quiet. It's like, no, our team is really loud, and we laugh a lot. So that was a big shock to everyone, because they figured just because you click mice and make charts all day that we'd be super quiet and introverted.
And that's kind of what's happening with us and the community at ALSAC as a whole. Is they're just now really getting exposed to us for pretty much the first time here in recent history. And so that exposure to us, I think, might be a little bit overwhelming at the same time as we're trying to nurture and develop the Tableau community.
We're a little loud. I mean, he's wearing a doctor's shirt at work. I mean, this is not like special attire. No, this is normalish.
Can I say I'm a little intimidated?
Kate, what about you?
So I think one of our biggest detriments being in state government, I think it was Kathy had made a comment in here earlier about, make it so it's not going to IT to do a lot of, the Tableau work and knowledge share. Unfortunately, my group is full-blown IT. We are application technology services. So we have development groups. I'm in the database group. So I can't really avoid IT, and my developers are part of my bureau. So we are full-blown in IT, and that definitely intimidates people. We should have everything that we need at our disposal, whether it's developers who can help us with the APIs, our database group with the data. One would think that we would be like the perfect unit to host Tableau and have a really successful team, but it's actually been a downside too, because our groups are also so siloed at the same time. So our developers are sort of say, we are the development group, we don't do anything else. And then we have our database group that I'm going to pick on myself and my own team of where we only do the data sources. And so we don't have that mesh of a cohesive team. And that's where, in a perfect world, we would have that support to embrace all of the different units and work together to help each other learn and develop our skills. And that's sort of why we're trying to restructure a lot of what we're doing, because I'm also not in a position where I'm a supervisor over a lot of these people. So a lot of these people are my peers. So that in and of itself has been a hurdle. And then sort of just on like dashboard design, one of my biggest detriments has been, I will have been tasked with like a big project, and I get it done and I get it published, and it's out there for people to see. And we have a repository where they can download the workbooks and see how it's created. But I haven't been good enough at, stopping to explain why I've made decisions that I've made in some of these dashboards. And I think as a new user, if you don't understand why someone's making some of the decisions they're making, or why this may work better than that, pie charts versus bar charts, it's hard to sort of wrap your head around that as a new user. So if we just take a step back and really embrace the fact that new users are new and take that time to explain the decision-making process, the design process, more the whys and the hows behind it, I think we'd get a lot more adoption, at least where I'm at.
Yep, exactly.
But besides the fact that Fee Gordon's comments are making it impossible to keep a poker face during this, I was going to say to Kate, I used to have a Sunday school teacher back in the day who was a Secret Service agent. And one of the things the Secret Service does that most people don't think about is they work with the Treasury, and they're excellent at dealing with counterfeiting. And one of the things that they do to teach Secret Service agents how to recognize counterfeit bills is to not show them counterfeit bills, is to show them overwhelming amounts of legitimate money, so that when they encounter counterfeit bills, they just know something's not right. They might not know why at first, but eventually they're going to get down to it. And I think one of the things you see in common with most of the best practitioners of what we do is they're exposing themselves to it so constantly. I mean, we're all here because obviously we sort of took the red pill and discovered a greater data community beyond just our workplace. And by the constant exposure we have to Makeover Mondays and the big book of dashboards and Tableau Public and everything else, you're seeing so many different data visualizations, both in a business context or data art or whatever, that when you see one that doesn't work, you might not know why at first, but you know it doesn't work. And I think that maybe one of the things that everyone needs to consider is just increasing exposure for everyone, so that when they have the temptation to do a pie chart with 300 wedges, they might think twice, because I feel like I saw something else like this someplace and it didn't quite feel right, and I don't know if it actually said anything.
One of the things that I recommend to new analysts is, well, I actually have been working with different teams, and we're actually discussing onboarding at one of our next analytics groups internally, is making sure that they have some materials when they're first onboarded. on our team, I make sure that each person that's new to analytics gets a nice pad of graph paper, an expensive engineering pencil for being able to draw an dashboard on paper first. And then the next thing that I do is I recommend and I show them my dirty little secret, as I call it, which is I have a Word document that when I have a few minutes of free time, I will go out online and I will just search for infographics and visualizations. And I find a plethora of things. And the ones that I find really interesting or visually stimulating or color options, I will snapshot those with my little clip it. I will save it in this Word document, and it's a mess. There's no order to it, but it's something that I can refer to and share with others so that they can, draw inspiration as needed. Because I think one of the, outside of storytelling and technical capabilities, curiosity is one of the things that the analysts need as one of their primary skills. And that's not necessarily something that you can teach, but it's something that you can nurture.
Cool.
David, if you make a Pinterest board with that, I will look at it, I promise.
Okay.
You're one follower on Pinterest now.
And share it widely.
Just for the audience who's listening, we sort of go towards the end of the panel. So if you have any questions, now's the time to ask them. Sort of my last question really is where to from here? Like you all worked on some form of adoption process within your company. What's up next? What's planned for the next year to push that further? Brian.
I'm going to pass for the moment. I need to consider my answer.
Okay, Kate.
I think, at least for my team, where we go from here is we're sort of in the middle of rethinking what we're doing. And that's not to say that we're scrapping everything that we've ever tried. It's sort of to reevaluate how we onboard people with Tableau, how we decide who we really want to be those Tableau champions. Because at least in our area, we're at a point where, me being a single person, I can't maintain all of the projects that we have for the state of Montana. I don't know why. I must have endless time. But just sort of rethinking how we're doing things to get people a little bit more excited, whether that's with data that we're used to, whether that's more fun data outside of, the workplace with like Makeover Mondays, Workout Wednesdays, stuff like that. But really focusing in on those people we think are going to be the ones that get really excited, and then to have them lean on, or for me to be able to lean on them to help spread adoption through their groups, since I can't be in, all 5 of our sections at once. And then on top of it, just our bureau having Tableau, we actually contract with other agencies. So it's impossible for all of us to be in all of these places at once. So to have those champions that I know Brian's mentioned quite a few times, sort of spread out so that we have resources available for when people have questions or need help or want some feedback, things like that. And so that's what we're working towards right now.
Thank you.
We're actually in bi-weekly meetings now, every other week, that is, where we're engaging key members of other divisions in order to continue to grow and expound upon all the things that we're doing internally on our team amongst and across the division. And we're engaging more and more leaders as we are able to concrete our work plan and showcase some of our results.
I mean, I would say the biggest asset we have that we can capture is boundless enthusiasm. So we're trying to find the people that are interested in the trouble areas that we have, whether it be onboarding or sort of coming up with data dictionaries or what have you, and saying, who's really excited about this? Like, who's passionate about it? They raise their hand, like, great, we would love for you to partner with someone else that's excited about this. We'll split off into areas of interest and work on it that way, because sometimes there's a perception, if there's a couple people that are really vocal, that they feel like they know it all, and we make no claims to that. And we wanted to be really encouraging and say, look, There's no expectation that anyone know what they're doing here. All we're looking for is, do you have some capability? Do you have some excitement for this? That's great. That's what we need as a starting point, because it's impossible for a few to do everything. But once everyone finds something that they're excited to plug into, it doesn't feel like work as much, and you're lifting everything.
And Tableau has been pretty excited about, when we speak to our representatives, anything that they can do to help us out. If it means working with us on how we might incorporate Blueprint into what we're starting to practice internally. I know the internal tugs that which is kind of what we're building out, talking about what is in the immediate geographic area as far as training opportunities that some people might not get to, because I don't know about any other businesses, but training budget is very different between areas. And so we're fortunate that we get to go to quite a few things. So we make sure to pass on our learnings to other areas, which is kind of what spurred the data doctor stuff. But making sure that more people are aware of things that are in the immediate area that might not cost as much, and they might have that opportunity to engage in.
Thanks. Brian, did you consider your answer?
Yeah, I think I'm going to go back to what I was describing originally in terms of the overall structure of the company. As I mentioned, we have a new umbrella organization that's all about augmented intelligence. We're going through a lot of technological change. We're adopting SAP for pretty much the whole shop on the medical medicine distribution side. And so I think our challenge is just as general analytics facilitators and as Tableau experts is to make sure that we remain relevant to the changing situation that we're going to be going through for the next few years. And also helping to reskill people where we can, because we have a lot of people with deep knowledge of the business, but with more novice knowledge of the technology that we're going into, Tableau and otherwise. And so we want to make sure that we serve them well.
Cool, thank you. I'll sort of take that as the closing remarks. I think we could easily spend another hour or so discussing the whole topic. Unfortunately, we have to come to an end at some point. Thanks to all four of you. To the audience, if anybody has sort of further questions, wants to stay in touch or sort of keep the discussion going, all five of us are on Twitter. So I'll post the handles in the chat as well. So just, I think all of us are fine. Just click us a message and we'll happily come back to them. For those of you who sort of found something interesting and want to get back to it, the session is recorded, so we'll publish it soonish on YouTube, so you could rewatch it. Yeah, and with that, thanks to Brian, Kate, David, and Zach for joining us, for sort of sharing their story, what did work, what didn't work. And I hope everybody got a little bit of knowledge and ideas out of that they can maybe take back to their organizations. Yeah, well, thanks again. And with that, over to Cesar again.
Alex, thank you. Panelists, thank you so much.